Welcome to the deep dive.
Yeah.
Today, we're tackling a topic that's pretty heavy,
Yeah.
but it's essential, especially for you, our UPSC aspirants out there.
It's a big one.
Yeah, we're going to dive into the recurring tragedy of genocide.
And
Now,
it's really crucial for understanding international relations and
sure.
human rights and even ethics, for those exams.
Absolutely. And there's no better day to do this, I think, than January 27th.
Right.
The anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz. Those 44,000 pairs of shoes left behind. It's
haunting.
It's a gut punch.
Yeah.
It's just a stark reminder of the scale of the Holocaust.
Yeah. Each pair representing a life lost
Right.
in the systematic murder of millions, mostly European Jews during World War II.
Right.
It's a horror that led to that global vow of never again.
Never again.
Right.
And yet genocide keeps happening.
Yeah.
So why has never again failed?
Well, to understand that, I think we need to define genocide clearly first. It's not just any violence.
Right.
It's very specific.
Help unpack that.
Okay, so the 1948 Genocide Convention really nails it.
Okay.
It's about acts committed with the intent to destroy in whole or in part a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group.
Wow.
So the chilling part is the intentionality of it.
So it's beyond scale.
Yes.
It's the deliberate targeting that makes it genocide.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And while the Holocaust is the most well-known example,
Right.
it wasn't the first and it wasn't the last.
Right.
Even before the war, the Nazi regime's actions should have been alarms,
Yeah, like the Nuremberg laws.
Exactly.
Stripping Jews of their citizenship.
Right.
And the Kristallnacht pogrom.
Exactly. But the world largely ignored those warnings, allowing the horror to escalate.
And this pattern of inaction, it just seems to repeat itself throughout history,
Sadly, yes.
doesn't it?
Take the Cambodian genocide from 1975 to 1979.
Right.
The Khmer Rouge under Pol Pot, they went on a rampage. They weren't just killing,
Yeah.
They were targeting intellectuals, minorities, anyone they saw as enemies of their twisted ideology.
It's mind-boggling that over 2 million people perished.
It is.
Yeah.
And what's even more disturbing is how the Cold War kind of overshadowed this genocide.
Right.
Global powers were so focused on containing communism
Right.
that they turned a blind eye to the suffering in Cambodia.
So basically, human lives were pawns
Yeah.
in a bigger political game.
Tragically, yes.
Wow.
China and the West backed the Khmer Rouge to counter Vietnam's Soviet-aligned government.
Right.
Realpolitik at its worst.
It shows how geopolitics can just completely hinder intervention,
Yeah,
even when a genocide is in full swing.
absolutely.
And sadly, the world, it feels like we didn't learn from this.
Right. Just a few years later, you have the Rwandan genocide of 1994, and the speed of it was just unbelievable.
Yeah.
Almost 1 million people slaughtered in just 100 days.
It's chilling how quickly hate speech can turn into mass murder.
It is. It is. It's terrifying.
The international community, they knew about the rising tensions,
They did.
the hate radio broadcasts,
Yeah.
yet they failed to act decisively.
They dragged their feet.
They did.
The UN peacekeeping force there was completely inadequate.
Right.
It really highlights the limitations of such missions when you're faced with a determined force set on genocide.
Raises serious questions about the effectiveness of these peacekeeping missions.
Yeah, it does.
Was Srebrenica in 1995 not another example of this?
It was.
A UN safe zone
Right.
that failed to protect those seeking refuge.
Srebrenica is heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Over 8,000 Bosnian Muslim men and boys systematically murdered.
Yeah.
It was the worst atrocity on European soil since World War II,
Yeah.
right under the supposed protection of the UN.
And the Dutch peacekeepers stationed there,
Right.
they were ill-equipped and outnumbered.
Yeah.
Their pleas for reinforcements went unanswered.
It's awful.
It almost feels like a betrayal,
Yeah.
a complete failure of protection.
It exposes a harsh truth,
Yeah.
Designating a safe zone means nothing
Right.
without the will and the capacity to defend it.
Right.
And it raises a crucial question, I think, for us to think about.
What's the...
What's the point of promises of protection if they're not backed by action?
It's a question that continues to haunt us as we move into the 21st century with the Darfur genocide.
Yes.
The Sudanese government and Janjaweed militias targeted non-Arab groups,
It's horrific.
leading to over 200,000 deaths and millions displaced.
Right, and what's particularly disheartening about Darfur is the slow response. The world knew about the atrocities in real time, yet it felt like nobody was really doing enough to stop it.
Right.
The ICC issued arrest warrants, but
those warrants just seem more symbolic than anything.
yeah, they didn't have the power to bring the perpetrators to justice,
right,
especially when dealing with powerful figures.
Exactly. Darfur highlights the limitations of international justice mechanisms when politics gets involved.
It really does.
It feels like a broken record. This cycle of violence and inadequate response.
It does, and it's incredibly frustrating.
This brings us to a contemporary crisis, the situation in Gaza.
Gaza, yeah. Gaza's complex, full of nuances that challenge our understanding of genocide in the modern world.
Right.
It's where the whole concept of never again is truly tested, I think.
I'm really curious to unpack this further.
Yeah.
It feels like everything we've discussed so far is converging on this one incredibly complex situation.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're right. Gaza brings up so many of the challenges we've been talking about. We're seeing a humanitarian crisis unfold there with devastating consequences for civilians.
Yeah.
Thousands of casualties, mostly women and children. And the destruction is immense.
Yeah.
Homes, hospitals, schools. It's heartbreaking.
And in the middle of all this, the ICC is investigating allegations of genocide.
Yeah.
They've even issued arrest warrants for both Israeli and Hamas leaders. It's a tangled web, to say the least.
Absolutely. The situation in Gaza highlights the difficulty of defining and responding to potential genocide when you have powerful actors on both sides,
right,
each with their own narrative and international backing.
It also seems to expose a troubling inconsistency in how the world reacts to different conflicts.
Yeah.
It's like there's a hierarchy of suffering where some crises get more attention and condemnation than others.
That's a sharp observation, and it's something that deserves serious reflection.
Yeah.
It brings us back to our central question: why does genocide keep happening, even with the world vowing never again?
It's a question that feels even heavier after looking at these examples, especially today, remembering the liberation of Auschwitz.
You're right. It's a day for somber reflection. And what's clear from these historical and contemporary cases is that there's no single easy answer.
Right.
But there are recurring patterns, failures, and systemic issues that contribute to this cycle of violence.
I'm eager to unpack what stands out. That what stands out to you is the biggest factors allowing genocide to persist.
Well, for one, the international community's response is often delayed and weak.
Yeah.
It's like we're stuck in a bureaucratic nightmare while atrocities unfold in real time.
You see this in Rwanda.
Exactly.
The UN peacekeeping force was so under-resourced and restricted by their mandate that they basically watched the genocide happen.
Exactly. It wasn't just about being slow. It was about lacking the will to act decisively. Think back to Srebrenica.
Yeah.
Declared a safe zone yet abandoned when it mattered most.
So even when the world acknowledges potential genocide, the mechanisms for intervention are flawed.
That's a key takeaway. It's like having a fire extinguisher that's always half empty or pointed in the wrong direction. It comes down to political will.
Yeah.
Too often, intervention is driven by what's politically convenient, rather than a genuine commitment to protecting lives.
And this is where geopolitical interests muddy the waters, like in Cambodia.
Yes.
Where Cold War anxieties took precedence over the human suffering happening under the Khmer Rouge.
It's a bleak reminder of how realpolitik can trump basic human decency. And sadly, this pattern persists. Look at the international response to Gaza.
Right.
It's fractured, polarized, making a unified, effective response near impossible.
It also raises concerns about double standards. How is it that some conflicts trigger global outrage and intervention, while others are met with apathy or even justifications for the perpetrators?
Those inconsistencies erode the credibility of the Never Again pledge. It's not just about reacting to violence.
Right.
It's about preventing it.
Yeah.
And that means recognizing the early warning signs of genocide.
So genocide doesn't just erupt out of nowhere. There are indicators, things we can look out for.
Absolutely. And for you, as UPSC aspirants, understanding these stages is crucial.
Go for it.
Genocide is a process, not a singular event. It starts with discriminatory policies, hate speech, then escalates to violence, and eventually systematic extermination.
It makes you wonder why those early signs are so often ignored or downplayed.
Sometimes it's deliberate, a way to avoid responsibility. Other times it's just incompetence or a lack of understanding. That's why the role of media, civil society, and international organizations is so important.
Yeah.
They're the ones sounding the alarm, documenting abuses, and pressuring governments to act.
So preventing genocide is a collective responsibility.
It
It's not
is.
just on governments, we all have a part to play.
Exactly. But even with vigilance, even if we act quickly, we can't ignore the root causes of this violence.
Let's talk about that. What are some of the underlying factors that lead to these cycles of hatred and bloodshed?
At the heart of it is prejudice, deep-seated ethnic or religious hatred, fueled by political opportunism, economic disparities. These are complex, multi-layered problems that require sustained effort to address.
So it's not enough to just stop the killing.
No,
We have to build a world where such violence is less likely to occur in the first place.
exactly. That means promoting tolerance, understanding, and respect for diversity.
Right.
It means tackling systemic inequalities and historical injustices that often breed resentment and division.
It sounds like a monumental task, something that might take generations to achieve.
It is a long-term project, but it's a project we must undertake if we want never again to be more than just a hollow slogan.
We've talked a lot about failures, the complexities, the things that made preventing genocide so difficult.
Right.
But are there any success stories? Times when the world actually managed to stop a genocide in its tracks?
That's an important question. While the narrative is often dominated by failures, there are glimmers of hope. There are cases where intervention made a real difference.
And those examples are crucial.
They are.
They show that it is possible to break this cycle of violence.
It is possible.
What can we learn from these successes?
One major lesson is the power of early and decisive action. When the international community acts swiftly, with a clear mandate and sufficient resources, it can have a real impact.
So speed and decisiveness are key.
They are.
No more bureaucratic delays or half-hearted measures.
Exactly, but it also requires political will, a willingness to prioritize human life over political maneuvering or economic self-interest.
And it can't just be one country acting alone. It requires cooperation between governments, international organizations, and civil society groups.
Right. The most successful interventions utilize a multifaceted approach. Think diplomatic pressure, economic sanctions, and, if necessary, military force. But it doesn't stop there.
Right.
We have to address the underlying causes of the conflict and work towards reconciliation.
So it's not just about stopping the immediate violence.
No.
It's about building lasting peace.
Precisely sustainable peace requires addressing the root causes of hatred and division we need to promote justice, accountability, and reconciliation.
Yeah.
Processes that can take years, even decades, to unfold.
It's a long-term commitment, but absolutely necessary if we want to truly break this cycle of violence.
Oh, you're getting it. And while the challenges are enormous, those past successes give us valuable insights into what works. It's about learning from our mistakes and our victories, constantly trying to improve our approaches, and strengthening our resolve.
I think it's also about understanding that preventing genocide isn't just some moral obligation.
Right.
It's in everyone's best interest.
I couldn't agree more. These atrocities have ripple effects. They destabilize entire regions, fuel extremism, and undermine global security. Genocide is a cancer on humanity.
Wow.
And eradicating it requires a sustained, multifaceted effort.
So where do we go from here? What are the key takeaways for our listeners, especially for those preparing for the UPSC exams?
First off, understanding the history and complexities of genocide is crucial. You need to be familiar with the definitions, the legal frameworks, the historical examples, and the current debates surrounding this topic.
And as we've been discussing, it's not just about memorizing facts and figures. It's about developing a nuanced understanding of the political, social, and economic factors that contribute to these horrors.
Exactly. You need to be able to recognize the warning signs, the stages of escalation, and how the international community has responded or failed to respond to these crises.
And I imagine for the UPSC exams, being able to analyze historical examples, draw comparisons, and identify patterns is key.
Absolutely. The examiners are looking for candidates who can demonstrate a deep understanding of the subject matter, think critically, and articulate well-informed arguments.
So it's not just rote memorization. It's about applying your analytical skills to real-world scenarios.
Precisely. And this is where the concept of never again comes in. UPSC exams often have questions about the effectiveness of international institutions, the challenges of peacekeeping, and the responsibility to protect vulnerable populations.
So you need to be prepared to discuss those issues thoughtfully and intelligently.
Remember, never again isn't just a slogan, it's a call to action. It's a reminder that we all have a responsibility to prevent genocide, speak out against injustice, and hold our leaders accountable.
because the consequences of inaction, as we've seen today, are catastrophic.
And while the challenges are huge, there's always hope. By understanding the past, learning from our mistakes, and working together, we can strive to make never again a reality.
It's a journey that requires our constant attention, critical thinking, and unwavering commitment to a more just and compassionate world.
And this isn't just about international relations for the UPSC exams. It's relevant to domestic policy analysis as well.
Oh, that's an interesting point. We tend to think of genocide as something that happens over there, far away.
Right.
But the reality is those seeds of hatred and division,
Yeah.
they can sprout anywhere.
Exactly. It's crucial for policymakers and citizens alike to be aware of the dangers of prejudice, discrimination, and dehumanization.
Right.
Those are the stepping stones to atrocities, whether on a massive scale or within our own communities.
So how do we guard against that? Where do we even start?
Well, education is key.
Yeah.
We need to cultivate a culture of empathy, understanding, and respect for diversity.
Yeah.
It's about recognizing our shared humanity and valuing the differences that make us unique.
I think that's where you, our UPSC aspirants, come in.
Yeah.
They're the future leaders, the policymakers, who can shape a society that's more resistant to hatred and division.
That's right. You have the potential to make a real difference, to build a world where never again isn't just a slogan,
Right.
but a lived reality.
This has been a heavy topic,
Well, it has.
but incredibly important, especially for our listeners preparing for the UPSC exams.
It's essential.
Thank you for sticking with us on this journey.
Yeah, thanks for listening.
Yeah.
It's a topic that demands our attention, our reflection, and most importantly, our action.
And remember, the fight against genocide is a collective one.
It is.
We all have a responsibility to be vigilant, to speak out against injustice, and to work towards a world where everyone is treated with dignity and respect.
Never again isn't just a promise, it's a challenge, a call to action that echoes through generations.
We hope this deep dive has given you valuable insights and sparked your passion for creating a better world.
I hope so.
If you found this episode helpful, don't forget to subscribe, leave a like, and share it with your friends and fellow UPSC aspirants.
Just spread the word.
Until next time, keep learning, keep questioning, and keep striving for a world where never again truly means never again.